What if the woman who welcomed you into the family turns around and humiliates you in front of 200 guests at your own wedding? What if the words she said that day became the fuel for a revenge you never planned, but life handed you the perfect chance to deliver? Hello, this is Ruby. And today, I'm going to tell you a story that begins at a wedding and ends at a doorstep, with a single knock that changed everything. It's a tale about pride, pain, and poetic justice. Buckle up, because what happened to Daniel might just leave your jaw on the floor. Daniel had always been the quiet, kind-hearted type. He wasn't the guy who commanded attention when he walked into a room, but he was the one you wanted in your corner. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, the son of a mechanic, he learned the value of hard work with grease under his fingernails. His dad taught him how to fix cars, how to listen to the engine's whispers, and how to dream. And Daniel's dream was simple, maybe even a little old-fashioned, to one day own a small auto shop, a place where he could build something with his hands, something of his own. When he met Claire, it felt like stepping into a different world entirely. She was a bright-eyed marketing executive, all sharp angles, and even sharper wit, from a family that defined well-off. Their paths shouldn't have crossed, but they did in a crowded coffee shop, over a shared love for a ridiculously obscure band. It was messy and unexpected and beautiful. It felt like two worlds colliding, but in the best possible way. Love, Daniel thought, didn't care about income brackets or zip codes. It just happened. But Claire's mom, Mrs. Kensington, cared. Oh, did she care? She was the matriarch, a woman who embodied old money pride wrapped in pearls and passive-aggressive smiles. She never explicitly forbade Claire from seeing Daniel. Nothing so dramatic. Her methods were far more subtle, far more insidious. She perfected the art of the condescending glance, the backhanded compliment that felt more like a sting, the polite question that highlighted every perceived difference between Daniel's world and hers. She made sure Daniel knew, in 1,000 small ways, that he didn't belong. He was an outsider looking in, a smudge on the otherwise perfect portrait of her family. Despite the constant low-level tension, Claire loved him. Or Daniel believed she did. He clung to that belief like a lifeline. And so they planned a wedding. A beautiful garden wedding, all fairy lights and fresh blooms. A stark contrast to the thorny relationship Daniel had with his future mother-in-law. They chose a venue that felt like a dream, invited friends and family, and went through the motions, hoping that maybe, just maybe, the joy of the day would smooth over the rough edges. But then it happened. The moment that would forever be etched in Daniel's memory, the moment that changed everything. The reception was in full swing, the air buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses. People were happy, celebrating. It was time for the toasts. The best man landed his jokes. The maid of honor spoke of Claire's kindness. And then it was Mrs. Kensington's turn. She stood, a picture of elegant grace in her designer dress, and raised her champagne flute. A hush fell over the crowd, expectant, waiting for the warm, welcoming words from the mother of the bride. Instead, she delivered a blow. "Here's to Claire." Mrs. Kensington's voice was clear, tinkling like ice in a glass, who has always had a kind heart. Even enough to marry a man who may be a bit of a, well, let's just say a work in progress. But we all carry burdens in life, don't we? The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. A beat of stunned silence stretched into an eternity. Then a few awkward, uncertain laughs rippled through the crowd. People avoided eye contact, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Daniel stood there, rooted to the spot, his smile frozen on his face. The noise of the reception faded into a dull roar in his ears. The gannong. The burden. She had called him a burden. At his own wedding. In front of everyone he knew, everyone Claire knew, 200 witnesses to his public humiliation. The air felt thin and he struggled to breathe. He felt a wave of heat rise from his neck, his cheeks burning with shame and something else, something hot and unfamiliar. Claire, her face pale, grabbed his hand, her fingers squeezing tightly. She whispered, "I'll talk to her later." But what was there to talk about? The words were out. They couldn't be unsaid. The damage was done. The seed of resentment, of hurt, of a deep simmering anger had been planted. And in the fertile ground of his humiliation, it would grow. Marriage wasn't the fairy tale Daniel had hoped for after that day. The sting of Mrs. Kensington's words lingered, a constant, unwelcome guest in their lives. It became the unspoken thing, the elephant in the room that they both pretended not to see, but that cast a long dark shadow over their relationship. Mrs. Kensington, in her own subtle way, made sure to keep the wound fresh. Whenever money was tight, whenever an unexpected bill arrived, she would sigh dramatically and say to Claire within Daniel's earshot, "If only you had married someone with a future, dear. Someone who could provide." It was a constant chipping away at Daniel's pride, a not-so-gentle reminder that he wasn't enough, that he hadn't measured up to her expectations. Daniel, fueled by a desperate need to prove her wrong, to shed the label of burden, threw himself into work. He took on a second job, working days at a local garage, the familiar scent of oil and gasoline a comfort, and nights delivering parts, the lonely roads a stark contrast to the life he was struggling to build. He worked until he was bone-tired, until his hands ached and his eyes burned, all to avoid asking for help, to refuse any hint of a handout. He was determined to build something piece by painstaking piece on his own. But the long hours, the exhaustion, the unspoken tension in their home, it all took its toll on his marriage. Claire, once his confidant, his partner, started to pull away. The late-night talks that had once been a cornerstone of their relationship dwindled, and then stopped altogether. The spontaneous hand-holding, the stolen kisses, the easy intimacy they had shared, it all faded. It was a slow, quiet drifting apart, more painful in its subtlety than any explosive fight could have been. By their third anniversary, the gap between them felt like a chasm. Claire had changed. The bright-eyed marketing executive Daniel had fallen in love with seemed to be slowly transforming into her mother's daughter. She became impatient, her voice laced with a snide tone that reminded Daniel unervingly of Mrs. Kensington. She was distant, preoccupied with a world Daniel didn't quite fit into. A world of networking events and career ladders that felt a million miles away from his garage. One night, after another exhausting day, Daniel sat across from her at their kitchen table. He had to be honest. He told her about the small warehouse space he had been looking at, the perfect spot for his dream auto shop, but admitted that it was still out of reach, the cost just too high right now. The words were barely out of his mouth when Claire's carefully constructed composure crumbled. "I'm tired of living like I married a mechanic," she blurted out, her voice tight with frustration. "My mom was right." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. My mom was right. The echo of Mrs. Kensington's wedding toast, the word burden, reverberated in his ears. He looked at Claire, at the stranger she had become, and in that moment something inside him shifted. The hurt was still there, a dull ache, but it was overlaid with a sense of clarity, a stark realization. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He didn't try to convince her. What was the point? The woman he loved was gone, replaced by someone who echoed her mother's dismissive judgment. Quietly, deliberately, Daniel got up from the table, walked to the closet, and packed a bag. A single bag. He left the house that night, the house that had never quite felt like home, and he never looked back. He filed for divorce. It was quiet, understated, much like Daniel himself. But it was also painful, a tearing away of a future he had desperately wanted, a confirmation of the burden he had been told he was. The struggle years were over. The years of trying to be enough, of trying to fit into a mold that wasn't his. He was free in a painful, heartbreaking way to build something new. 2 years. 2 years since Daniel had walked out of that house, since he had shed the weight of a marriage that had become a burden in itself. He poured every ounce of his energy, every dollar he had saved, into his dream. He finally found a small warehouse space, not in a fancy part of town, but in a neighborhood that felt like home, a place with good bones and honest people. He rolled up his sleeves and with his own 2 hands started to build. He named it D&K Autoworks, a quiet tribute to his late father, the man who had taught him the value of a wrench and the dignity of honest work. In the beginning it was a one-man show. Daniel was the mechanic, the cleaner, the receptionist, the parts manager. He fixed cars during the day, the familiar rhythm of the work a balm to his soul. He cleaned the toilets at night, humility a surprising comfort. He managed the orders, the paperwork, the endless stream of tasks that come with starting from scratch. He was tired, often bone-tired, but it was a good tired, a tired that came from building something real. Then something happened. Something unexpected, something that felt a little like fate intervening. A bright, bubbly TikTok influencer, known for documenting her life and her various projects, needed work done on her vintage convertible. She'd heard about D&K Auto Works through a friend of a friend, a whisper about a mechanic who treated cars with respect, who had a knack for bringing old beauties back to life. Daniel didn't know anything about TikTok or influencers. He just saw a beautiful car that needed his help. He didn't just fix the engine. He painstakingly restored the interior, polished the chrome until it gleamed, and buffed the paintwork until it looked better than new. He treated that car like a treasure, with the same care and dedication he would have given his own father's vehicle. The influencer was ecstatic. She filmed a before and after video, showcasing the transformation of her beloved convertible, highlighting Daniel's skill and passion. The video went viral. Suddenly, D&K Auto Works was no longer a quiet neighborhood garage. It was a destination. Business exploded. The phone rang off the hook. People were driving from hours away, drawn by the viral video, by the promise of a mechanic who cared. Daniel hired more staff. Good people who shared his work ethic and his passion for cars. He opened a second location, then a third. He was featured in a local paper, the headline a testament to his journey. From divorce to drive. How one man rebuilt his life under the hood. He didn't chase fame or recognition. He just kept his head down, kept working, kept building. He expanded his business, diversified his services, invested wisely. The quiet, kind-hearted kid from the working-class neighborhood was still there. But he was now a successful businessman, respected in his industry, a man who had proven his worth not with words, but with actions. Until one day his real estate agent called. "Daniel," she said, her voice slightly hushed, "I have a listing you might be interested in. It's unusual." Daniel was always looking for investment opportunities, but he wasn't prepared for what she showed him. It was a large, elegant house in an older, affluent part of town, a house he recognized instantly. It was the Kensington family house. For sale. Not a quiet, planned sale either. A desperate sale. The kind that happens when finances collapse, when the weight of maintaining a lifestyle becomes too much to bear. Foreclosure was looming. Daniel didn't hesitate. He didn't need to think about it, didn't need to weigh the pros and cons. This wasn't just a real estate transaction. This was something else entirely. He bought it. In cash.
No loans, no mortgages.
Clean and simple. The house that had once represented everything he wasn't, everything he couldn't measure up to, was now his. 5 years. 5 years to the day since the wedding toast, since the word burden had been spoken in front of 200 people. 5 years since Daniel had stood there, feeling the heat of humiliation crawl up his neck. He pulled up to the Kensington house in his car. Not the beat-up truck he'd driven for years, but a sleek, restored vintage Cadillac, a testament to his skill and success. He parked the car and walked up the familiar flagstone path, the same path he had walked nervously as Claire's boyfriend, as her fiancé. The house looked the same on the outside, the manicured garden still neat, the paintwork still pristine, but there was a subtle air of neglect, a faint peeling at the edges if you looked closely enough. He reached the front door and raised his hand. He didn't hesitate. He didn't feel a surge of triumph or anticipation, just a quiet sense of purpose. He knocked. A moment later the door opened. Mrs. Kensington stood there, looking older perhaps, her shoulders a little less rigid, but still holding her head high, the pearls still perfectly in place. But in her eyes Daniel saw it, a weariness, a shadow that hadn't been there before. She looked at him, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Yes?" she asked, her voice polite but puzzled. She didn't seem to recognize him at first. Or perhaps she simply didn't want to. Daniel smiled. It wasn't a triumphant smile, not a smirk. It was a quiet, knowing smile. "Hello, Mrs. Kensington," he said, his voice calm and even. "I believe we've met before." Recognition flickered in her eyes, quickly followed by a mask of carefully controlled surprise. "Daniel? Is that really you?" "It is," he confirmed. He paused for a moment, letting the silence hang between them, a silence filled with years of unspoken words, of hurt and judgment and resilience. "I just wanted to let you know," Daniel continued, his voice still calm, steady. "I'm your new landlord." Her eyes widened, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows shooting up. She blinked once then twice. "Excuse me." The composure began to crack just slightly. "I bought the house, Mrs. Kensington," Daniel stated simply. "You'll find the updated lease terms in this envelope." He held out a thick cream-colored envelope. "Rent's due the 1st of the month." There was no yelling. No dramatic speech about how she had wronged him. No recitation of the insults he had endured. No grand declaration of revenge. Just the sharp, undeniable sting of reality. The man she had dismissed as a burden, the man she believed had no future, was now the owner of her home. The power had shifted completely and irrevocably. Daniel didn't wait for a response. He had said what he needed to say. He turned, walked down the steps, the same steps he had once ascended with hope in his heart, and got into his car. He started the engine, the powerful purr of the restored Cadillac a satisfying sound. In the rearview mirror, he saw her still standing there, on the doorstep of the house she no longer owned. Speechless. Some people say success is the best revenge. Maybe they're right. Daniel didn't plan it that way. He didn't build D&K Autoworks with the sole purpose of buying the Kensington house. He built it because it was his dream, because he believed in himself when others didn't. But when life, in its strange and often ironic way, hands you the perfect chance to rise above those who tried to bury you, you don't gloat. You don't shout your victory from the rooftops. You don't need to. You knock. Gently. And you walk away smiling. This is Ruby. If you've ever been made to feel like a burden, remember this. You're not heavy. You're just not meant to be carried by the wrong people. See you in the next story.